Hi guys, so today what we're going to look at is solving quadratic inequalities. So we've looked at solving linear inequalities and found essentially what we're doing is just following our normal equation rules unless we have to multiply or divide by a negative, in which case we flip the sign. It's pretty much the same for quadratic to start with, but there's a little bit at the end which is slightly different to what we've been doing in order to solve. So what we have is you have x squared minus x is greater than or equal to 6. We're asked to solve for this particular inequality. So we do what we normally do, and we try to sort of solve it, I suppose. So you're looking at that. What would we normally do? We'd normally take it all to one side, put it equal to 0. So we've got x squared minus x minus 6 is greater than or equal to 0. And this is where we can now factorize it. So we are going to factorize it as we would normally. So what we do now is we factorize this using any method that you wish. So this one's quite straightforward. I think it's x minus 3, x plus 2. So it's greater than or equal to 0. And from here, this is where it gets slightly different to what we'd normally do. Now we are going to work out its roots as we normally would. So we have from here, x is equal to 3. And from here, we have x is equal to minus 2. So we've just solved the equation and pretended as if it was equal to 0. Now what I want to do is I want to just quickly draw a sort of rough sketch of what's going on here. So what we have is, there's my graph, and it's going through the axis at minus 2 and 3. So it looks something like that, where this is minus 2 and this is positive 3. And we know it's U-shaped, it's an x squared graph, so that shouldn't be surprising. Now, this here is the line y is equal to 0. And what we are essentially being asked in this particular question is we're asked to find the values of x where x is greater than or equal to 0. And there's my 0 line is here. So anything above this line means that my answer is going to be greater than 0. So as you can see here, the curve is above the line here, and it's also above the line here. It's underneath the line here between minus 2 and 3. And those are the values that I don't want. So I only want the values coming from here and the values going in that direction there. I don't want, I repeat, I don't want the values underneath this line because it says here it has to be greater than or equal to 0. So, how do I write that? Well, it means I'm going to end up with 2 inequalities as my answer. So I want x to be less than or equal to minus 2, and that will give me all the curve that goes in this direction. So anything to the left of here will be above the y is equal to 0 line. And I also need, from this bit on the right-hand side, that x has to be greater than or equal to 3. Because if I get that, then what's going to happen here is I'm going to get all of the curve to the right of this critical point, I suppose you could call it, to the right of 3. Now suppose I was given, instead of x squared minus x is greater than or equal to 6. So suppose I was given as the question x squared minus x was less than or equal to 6. We'd do exactly the same process, and we'd end up with x squared minus x minus 6 is less than or equal to 0. We'd solve in exactly the same way. So we'd factorize x plus 2 here, less than or equal to 0. Then we'd find the critical values, x is equal to 3 and x is equal to minus 2. And again, we draw exactly the same diagram, okay, and we get exactly the same shape. There it is. And this would still be minus 2, and this would be 3. But if we have a look at our equation, or our inequality, I should say here, it says less than or equal to 0. Well, that means it has to be underneath this line here. And underneath this line goes from this position to this position here. So it's only underneath the y is equal to 0 line between the values of minus 2 and 3. So, how do we write that? Well, we can write that in order for this to be true, the one on the right-hand side, that x must be less than or equal to 3, but it must also be greater than or equal to minus 2. So, it's really, really important that you look at the inequality, because the inequality tells you which part of the graph that you're going to want for your answer. So, you can see here, once we've flipped this inequality, that we get two different answers.